everybody and welcome back to Elle the Law Student. Today I'm going to be talking about open days, and this is because there will be some open days coming up in September, October time, including some more open days at Oxford. Why would you be going to these open days? First of all, you might be really on top of it. You might have just started year 12 and you want to get some open days out of the way now before the summer. Or you might be in year 13 and you've still got a few more open days that you would like to go to. Also, I just thought, I'm not sure if I'll remember to post something when open days start. I can never remember exactly when they start, so at least this will be on the internet for you to watch later on in the year. So I went to quite a few open days. I went to one in Bristol, one in Oxford, one in Liverpool, one in Durham and one in Lancaster. The only one of those that I didn't apply to was Lancaster because it was a campus university and I decided that I didn't want to go to a campus university. First of all, you need to narrow down where exactly it is that you want to visit, because there'll be so many universities that you probably are quite interested in, and realistically you don't have the time or the money, I expect, to visit all of them. There are a few things that I would consider. First of all, the course. Making sure they do the course that you actually want, obviously, but in addition to that, say there's something specific about that course, then make sure that is included. Maybe if you want to study history, you want to study more modern history. Maybe if you want to study English, you're really interested in Victorian. Maybe if you want to study law, you're quite interested in the criminology side of things. And lots of courses, even though they have the same name, have very different content. So definitely have a look at that, and if it's not something you're interested in, then that's obviously a really easy way to narrow these things down. The next thing is location. So for example, for me, I wanted to move away from home for university. The closest university that I visited was Liverpool. Some people might want to move away from home, but they don't want to move too far away from home. So for example, I probably wouldn't have gone to University of Exeter just because I know that for me it would have been super difficult to get to Exeter. I remember getting a prospectus and thinking, realistically this seems like a lovely university, but it's going to be such a pain to get me to and from university at the beginning and end of term, and if I wanted to come home mid-term it wouldn't really be an option. Looking at the location and train links and that sort of thing can be really important. And finally, the cost of living. I would probably take this one with a pinch of salt because, for example, if you're going to be living in London, yes, your cost of living is higher, but you'll also have higher maintenance loan. In terms of finance, there's lots of different bursaries and that sort of thing that you can get. However, it is something to consider if you know that money will be quite tight at university. Maybe you don't want to be looking at a city where you need to be living in privately owned accommodation for the majority of your course, and that accommodation will probably have to be in the city centre. These things are worth looking at, but out of all of them I would say cost of living probably isn't your top priority. There's generally ways around these things. In addition to that, I would really recommend visiting a city university, a campus university, and then probably like one more modern university and one slightly older university. That will help you to sort of decide the kind of field that you want. I decided I didn't want to go to a campus uni after going to Lancaster, and that was super helpful for me because it helped me to eliminate the other campus universities in the UK. In terms of the age of it, so for example, some people might really like the idea of going to a super modern university, some might like the idea of going to an older one. For me, that didn't really matter. It was more kind of the general feeling of the city, but it might be something you want to consider. So when you actually get to your open day, I would say the things that you want to have a look at the top of your list are taster lectures and accommodation tours. Taster lectures I personally think are better than just having talks about the subject itself. I found taster lectures really great because it helped me to understand how lectures would work and whether I would like the teaching style at that university. Accommodation tours, I found those to be really handy, not because you were just looking at the accommodation, which is important, I would say, to make sure that you have a look at some catered accommodation and some self-catered accommodation. Again, look at older accommodation, newer accommodation, see what kind of thing you want to have in your first year. For example, I went to Bristol and I looked around accommodation there, and because I'd seen some self-catered accommodation and some catered accommodation, then they were pretty similar across the universities as well. But also on accommodation tours, it's generally students who'll take you around, and that's really great because that's your opportunity to ask those students loads of questions. One thing I would say is I think that whenever I've helped out on open days or school visits or anything, is that a lot of students seem to be so concerned about making a really good first impression, and that's great, and I understand why you want to do that. But realistically, you're not going to make a bad impression if you ask what you think is a stupid question. It's not silly to ask a question that you think everyone else knows the answer to. Honestly, we've had worse. In terms of asking questions, sometimes it can be quite daunting to ask that first question, and so I found it really helpful to have some questions in mind. And then once I had sort of a set question that I could ask, then sometimes it was easier to sort of get into a conversation with the student and talk to them a little bit more about other things. Next up, if you can, I would say it would be really handy if you could try and go in a group to a lot of these open days. This isn't something that I managed to do because me and my friends were looking at quite different universities. But for example, say there were 4 of you, maybe one of your parents could drive you or one of you could drive you to one open day and then you could go to another, and just going as a group can make things slightly cheaper. When I went to Liverpool, I went there with a friend and we stayed there overnight, and because there were the 2 of us, we stayed in a hotel. We stayed in quite a cheap hotel, and it didn't cost us that much money, and that way it can sort of be a bit more budget friendly. Finally, and I don't think many people do this, but for me it was my favourite part about going to open days, and that's making sure that you have enough time to actually look around the city itself. What you've got to remember is if you go to university in this place, you won't be spending your whole life at the university. You'll be looking around the city, that's where you'll have to live, and so many people stay in the city that they went to university in as well, so it could even be somewhere where you potentially live for a few years afterwards. Make sure you like it there. Go out and see that city, see what that community's like, and just make sure that this is somewhere that you would actually want to live, because it could be the most amazing university ever, but if once you leave that university and walk out into the streets, you're not excited by the place you live, that can be quite difficult because university can be an intense experience, and if your only place to go is the university, then it can seem like there's no escape from that pressure. If you do have any questions about open days, please let me know as ever, and I'm happy to make other open day videos if there's anything a bit more specific. This was just a really kind of general, off the top of my head video, to be fair. I did put a few more tips on my Instagram a few weeks ago when it was the Oxford Open Day, and they're saved to my story, so if you want to have a look at those you can. And I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you soon. Bye!